So here in this object called a group, where you're having all possible groups that you can share with. So you have a type of group. It could be a role, or with what or how many roles you have this same set of role names. You will be having a role and role subordinates, and then you will be having a role subordinates internal, and then you have a organization like all partner users, all internal users, and you have a queue, and you have a public groups also. The public groups you will be having a type as a regular. So if you want to share with any specific group, it could be role subordinate or role subordinate internal or all organizations or queues or public group. Just you have to give that name of that your group or a role name, then what is the type you are looking for in that, and then you can give that ID, and instead of the user ID you can use that group ID here, and you can save so that it will be sharing to that group itself. So now let's take an example of sharing the record with a public group called share project record with a team user with read access. Here share with a edit access. Run now. Share with a read access with a public group. So here instead of a user, we will be sharing it to a group. So you'll be having a query on it. Where type equal to regular and developer name, and developer name equal to my first group. So this is the record, and you need to share this record with that. So we have this one. So instead of a team user ID, we're going to use a my group ID. Here I'm going to share as a read access. I'm going to use the same row cost. For an individual user or a group, you can use the same reason also, you can use it, nothing to worry. That's it, done. Now let's not saved yet. Let's wait. So meanwhile, it's getting saved. So all we are expecting was now it will be shared with the instead of a user, you will be having a public group name over here. It will be coming up after we are sharing the record. It's not saved yet. It looks like it's saved now. Refresh. Now you see one public group called my first group, and it's giving a read-only access with the same my recent one. So this is how you will use a sharing. And let's say now you are able to see here what are all the different ways this record is being shared over here. If I need to check it from a Apex port, if I need to check from a Apex code, how we can check that. So this is the name and access level, the reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check on the same object. That is on the project share object itself. I would query on a parent ID access level row cost and see where whatever the record that you would like to check, what is the access level for a specific user. Then you can look for this ID and then you can give here. And you can see all possible sharing that's being given. So we have a parent ID, group ID. These are all the records, right? What we created. The same what you see here as well. So we need to go and check here. So before you do sharing, you will check this object whether already the sharing is being done or not, and then you do a share. So any questions over here on Apex sharing?
So Bala, here we are querying for the project shared object, right?
Right.
So in the same way, like, do we have, I mean, for all the object, we have like share object in the backend, like object
Not not
account.
not for all objects. That's what I initially was saying. What are all the objects that OWD are set to private or public read, only those objects only having this concept of a sharing, and to what objects we have a concept of sharing, only those objects are visible. So let's say if you're asking about account don't have any share. Why? Because it is not a private object. So if we go to sharing settings and see for account whether it's a OWD is private or public read, definitely it will not. That's why it is not showing up over here. So only when the OWD is private or public read only, then only you see the sharing object, then only Apex sharing or any sharing is possible. Okay.
Okay, Bob.
Yeah. If you look at a account, it is saying a read write access. It's not a write or a public read. So what all you having a public access or public read write access, you will not be having any share object for those objects. What all we have a private, you can see that a share object is available. Okay. Now moving on to some interesting topics: custom setting and custom metadata. So now what all we see so far was objects and storing the data in objects. Then we do a software query on those objects and we can get the data. And we see there are some governor limits while doing a query on the DMLs on the objects. So, but you have a certain data that you want to access very often, like even a small piece of code or like wherever the code you execute, you need some references that need to be stored in some objects. Let's say mm, something called similar to, let's say you have some trigger account triggers, whether you need to execute the trigger or not. So you want to maintain a flag in somewhere, and so in your code, before executing the trigger, you want to check that flag whether I can execute my trigger or not. Okay, so then it will go to that object and check um, query on that account trigger whether I can execute or not. If the flag is true, then okay, go and execute. If the flag is false, then don't execute. Similarly, I have a project trigger flag. So why we should maintain a flags like that? Why? Because if you take when the org is growing and all, so you will be having multiple logics in a triggers, for example, and you having some data load where you don't want this trigger logics to be executed. Why? Because if the triggers are executing, you will not able to load the data. Why? Because there are a lot of logic that's going to be executed and which are all not required at this point of time for me. And I want to stop executing the trigger. Meanwhile, the user does a data load. In those scenarios, so actually we have a concept of activating and inactivating the triggers. That means, let's say I have some triggers over here. I have some Apex triggers. So in the trigger, we have a flags called active and inactive, which I have a account of the trigger. Let's say if I don't want to execute the trigger, then what I can do, I can go to the trigger and edit and do this as inactive. And then it will not fire this trigger because the status is inactive. So it will not fire this trigger. But when you are in the live environment, you cannot do this. You cannot activate or inactivate a trigger in a production org. So if you want to inactivate or activate a trigger, what you have to do, you have to deploy this trigger. First of all, you have to inactivate this trigger in your sandbox and you need to deploy this trigger to a production. And again, if you want to activate, again, you want to activate the trigger. Sorry, you have to activate the trigger in a sandbox and you need to deploy to production. So which is hectic process if you have a daily loads and you should do a daily deployment. So which is not possible. So in those scenarios, what we'll do was instead of doing that, in this trigger block, from the starting point of itself to the end of the end line, we'll give one if condition, and that if condition what we'll check for a flag, and we'll maintain that flag in one of the object. In that object, either we save it as a true or false. If it is a true, then it will execute the remaining logics inside it. If it is a false, then it will not enter the logic. Even though it enters the trigger, we are stopping to enter it into the inside blocks by adding that flags. In a similar scenario, let's say you are selling some products and you're having some discount offer based on account type. Let's say you have some account type as platinum, gold, silver, and all. Based on each type, you will be having a different discounts. So it's not a fixed, and you want to configure somewhere. So you will have create one object where you will mention, okay, if the account type is this one, then give a discount as a 10%, 20%, 50%, or 2%, 3%. You want to configure it. Today it is that because in the next season you want to increase or decrease the offers, or you have a new account types added. You want to configure something. So whenever there is a sales happening, you want to provide the discount from that object. So if you take this example of a flag or discounts, what you will be doing, so even a single record is being created, you're going to get that query that object and get the data. So what's happening? So every time by default you are consuming a one SQL query and a one SQL row is being utilized, or you are getting reduced from your limit if you are using a normal objects. Instead of using a normal objects, if we have some special objects where we can have a very less data and every time most frequently used data that you want to keep in a or which can be very widely used, and you don't want to consume any kind of a SQL queries for it for getting that data. We had a concept of a custom settings. So this custom settings is also looks like an custom object. So it will be having a object name and fields, object name and fields. It will be having like a normal object. You will be creating objects and fields to it, and you will be having a records can be stored in it. But how they are different? Custom settings are stored in a application cache, application cache, cache memory, not in a database. So when we having all these limits, when you having it in a database, the data is in database and you are doing a SQL queries to SQL queries to get the data, then only you will be including that retrievals as a governor limits. But because the custom settings are stored in an application cache without even though you can query it, and also you can use a special methods to get the data from this custom settings. Okay, so retrieving the data from custom settings are super fast. It will in a no time it will get the data. Even the databases, if we have less records, it's also faster, but compared to that it will be more faster when using a custom settings, but we cannot use for all the objects as a custom settings. And here you will not have object tab for the custom settings. So you cannot use like a normal objects. It's only purely a backend purpose only. You have to use for a custom settings. Even though they look like an object, it will not have any tab for it for creating the records. Now we have a two types of custom settings. So those are, one is the list settings, second one is hierarchical settings. What is the difference? So list setting is looks exactly similar to our normal table. So we'll be having some fields and we are creating a data. So you can have any number of records with that fields of that object. Whereas hierarchical settings, so if you have one hierarchical, so you will be having only one record for a as a default value for org level, and one for an profile level, and one for a user level. Let's say in your org, in your org, um, list settings will be like a normal object. You can have any number of records in it. Whereas in hierarchical settings, the number of records depends on the profiles and users. What it means. So let's say you created a hierarchical object and you have 4 or 5 fields. How the record will be org default value, and for each profile what is the record value, and for each user what is the value. That's how it is. Let's say you have like 50 profiles in your org and you have 250 users. In that case, the maximum records that you can store in the hierarchical settings will be 250 plus 50, 300 plus 1. Total, you can store up to a 301 records only in the hierarchical settings. So you can have some kind of data that you want to have a specific data based on the user role or a user or a org. If you have some kind of a hierarchical data, then you can go for hierarchical settings, and we can use the hierarchical settings in a formula fields as well. Whereas list settings, we cannot use it in a formula. And we have some methods how to extract the data from a custom settings. We'll see that methods and all, and how to create a custom settings. Let's jump onto it. First of all, we need to go to a setup, and here we need to look for a custom settings. So in the custom settings, we have this kind of a UI. First I'll type here, create new custom settings, go to setup, and then search for a custom settings, and then do a new. So let's say I'd like to say so by default it's giving only the hierarchical. We need to so actually what happened was initially we have only custom settings which is of type list and hierarchy. Later the Salesforce has introduced a concept called custom metadata, whereas the custom metadata also similar to a list setting, but it coming with its own advantages. And Salesforce want to promote the custom metadata, and by default it's not enabling the list settings. And if you want it specifically, then only it's asking to enable and use it. So use the custom metadata types for a app configurations. If you think using a list custom settings, consider using a custom metadata types instead. Unlike list custom settings, you can migrate the records to a custom metadata using a package metadata. You can enable settings to a schema settings page setup. So we need to go to a schema settings page to enable the list settings. Let's go to a schema settings page. Go to a setup. Enable the list custom settings. We need to go to schema settings. List text metadata as well custom. Manage list custom settings type. Enable list as a setting type option in the new custom setting definition page. Okay. Here you see it's disabled now. Below. Now once I refresh, let's see. Now it is enabled, and you can switch between a list and hierarchical custom settings. Let's say I want to maintain the trigger flags. I would like to make maintain. So to have the trigger flag, and I would say it's a list. And visibility, public or protected, you can maintain. Same. Here by default we have a label and master labels are not available as a required fields. And on top of it, we can add some more custom fields. In the custom fields, you can see you don't see all the fields like a normal objects. We'll be having only selected fields only the selected data types only available in creating the custom settings. You don't have any relations, you don't have any formulas. You'll be only having a normal script primitive data types, checkbox, currency, date, time, email number, percentage, phone, text area, and URLs. The basic or a primitive uh, data types only available in a custom setting, custom fields. So there, schema settings. Okay, and what is the value? Manage list type, custom setting, and enable it. Enable to use the list settings. Now you create, there you have to give a name and all, everything is there. We can create custom fields of type. What the types are allowed? Checkbox is allowed. Text is allowed. Text area is allowed. And what else we have? Date is allowed. currency number, currency and number we have, and we have a date and date time we have, and we have emails also we have. Percentage phone also we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 URL. We have URL also here. Only these are the data types available in a custom settings. Okay, let's say I want to have a checkbox field. I want to decide whether true or false for a triggers. So I was creating a checkbox field called active. Now done. I have my custom setting and I want to have one custom field done. So how to create a records in a custom settings. So you see there is a delete option and you can edit and you can change the type of this custom setting, nothing else. So now how to create a records in this custom settings. So here we see the manage button from here where we can see the existing records and either you can add new records or modify the records over here. How to create records in a custom settings. So go to custom settings, then click on a manage records and then new. So this is how you can create a records to it. So now I have in this, I have a account object and I would like to activate the flag. Similarly, I would like to have a one more called a project object. I have a project object and I would say activate. So I have an account and I for project also I have. I'm going back and saying, so these are the data. So now I have some records in it. Or trigger flags. I'd like to have a whether it's active or not. I would like to know when it's created and when it's last modified. I would like to see. Visible to all users and we'll save. So I have this account, so the records, and then when it's created, when it's modified, whether it's active or not flag was. Now, now I have created a custom settings. Now I created a data. Now, how to read this data in my Apex without using a SQL queries? First of all, what is the API name of my custom setting? My custom setting API name is custom setting API name is this one, trigger underscore flag underscore underscore C. and I have a field is um, only have only one flag called a active. One is only custom field I have. Other than I have only the label is the thing I have. So if you look at here, the custom setting, what I have over here, so it is not refreshed yet. So I will just refresh the developer console. Control shift O. So this is the custom setting. So I have ID, name, and active. I will just do a query. So these are all the I can do a normal SQL query. I can write a SQL query as well, but it will not skip our the consumption of SQL queries. This will also consume the SQL query, but without consuming SQL query also we can get the data. How to get the data? So go to anonymous window and here system.debug. Here we can have a system settings. This one system dot get all. So what it does is it will also does the same. What are all the data that is available in the custom setting? It will get all the data. So you see here in this trigger flag, you see last modified date is deleted, created by ID, created date. It will query all the fields in it. They have for account last modified, and then we have for the second record is for some other. So instead of getting all, if you are looking for only a specific record, then we can use a instead of all, you can give the name of your record. Let's say if you're only looking for a account one, so you can give only a I can give only for account instead of getting all. You can get only the account. Or if you are looking for other record, so there has to be a data available. Then only you can get it. And a project. So let's say custom setting account and custom setting project. So let's see execute highlighted. We're saying non-static method cannot be referenced to static context or trigger flag setting. Mm, 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 mm. Okay, I think it's almost done. So we'll continue tomorrow. And what are all the different methods? Get all is one method, and we have a get method. And again, we have different methods for hierarchical as well. We'll explain more details about the custom settings tomorrow, and we'll continue. And we have very few topics left: custom label, test classes, and SOSLs. So let me and one is a schema and iterable, and okay, these are also there.